Hi everyone, hope you're having a good day. I'm Susan Walsh, I'm the classification guru, a fixer of dirty data and creator of quotes. If you don't know what that is, then you will find out more about that shortly. Now, I'm based in the UK. You may or may not recognise my accent. I am Scottish, but I live in England now, so I will try and speak slowly and hopefully you enjoy my dulcet tones. So today I am going to talk to you about the dangers of dirty data, what that is, how you can work with your data to prevent that, and just apply it to a business context so that you can work with all your colleagues. So I am going to share my screen. So let's just see. Okay, so I hope you're ready for the ride and enjoy it. I hope that you enjoy this. If you think of any questions along the way, please pop them in the comments box and we'll answer them at the end. So let's go through what I'm going to talk to you about today. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Why am I here? Why am I talking to you about dirty data? How did I fall into this? And then I'm going to tell you, well, what is dirty data? Because maybe my opinion of what dirty data is different to yours. Then we're going to talk about the importance of data quality and actually why should we care about this? You may know, but you may not. And what are the consequences of this dirty data when you actually have it in your system, in your workplace? How does that have a knock-on effect on everything that's going on in your organisation? And then we're going to talk about how you can ensure that data accuracy. So try and maintain it and keep it going so that you don't have these problems ongoing. And then how do you spot check it? So that's a really important part of ongoing maintenance of your data. So I'm going to give you some really quick tips on how you can spot that in Excel. So you don't have to use any fancy software. You don't have to have a massive technical knowledge to be able to spot check your data. And that's one of the things that's going to be really important in maintaining more accurate data. Then finally, I'm going to summarise all that for you, and I may or may not have a nice little video to share with you at the end of this. So let's get started. Let's talk about my favourite subject, me. Just kidding. But it gives me a really good opportunity to tell you why I'm qualified to talk about this today. So, who the hell is the classification guru? You may or may not have seen me on LinkedIn. I kind of am a serial poster, so I may have come up in your timelines. Apologies, hands up. I do post a lot, so I'm very sorry if I'm there a lot. But if you don't know me, I have had a really varied career, and so I think that's really given me the skills to get to where I am now. So after university, I went into FMCG corporations, blue chip companies, and worked in sales, account management, all those good things. And it was something that I thought I should be doing rather than what I actually wanted to do. So I decided to leave that, and I did what everyone does when they're having a crisis. I opened a whole shop, an actual shop in Guildford, a full premises. I kitted it out with some lovely clothing, did all the interior designing, bought all the products, and it was a great shop. And on paper, and even as you can see, it was really nice. But in Guildford, unfortunately, there's a lot of brand snobbery. So people wouldn't come in the shop because it wasn't Chanel, it wasn't Gucci, it wasn't Hugo Boss. So it took a long time to really start to build up my brand. But unfortunately, by about 8-9 months in, I didn't have any money left. So I had to shut the shop. And at that point, I couldn't even afford to go bankrupt. I had to save to go bankrupt. It was £650, I think. So things were really bad. And I found an ad on Gumtree for a spend analytics company, and they were looking for some data entry and data classification work. Now, I had never worked in procurement before. I had never worked with data before, not in a specific context. But as soon as I started, I found that I took really naturally to classifying the data, working with the software that we were using. And I think that my experience of working in business really helped to round all that knowledge off. But what I noticed when I was working there was all these companies were spending a fortune on dashboards and software and all this great, all singing, all dancing stuff. But the real issue behind it all was the data, the quality of the data. It was shocking. And nobody seemed to be focusing on that part. And that was like 80-90% of the whole project, was clearing the data. So I really saw an opportunity to focus in specifically on the data cleaning bit. Because I was doing spend data classification, it's a very niche and specialist skill. And having managed a team of about 14 people, I knew that when I was training them, it was taking 3 to 6 months to get them up to speed. So I knew that working in this area, that it wasn't a menial task that anybody could do, but I felt like other organizations may not think that way. And so that is why I started Classification Guru. And that is why I'm here talking to you today, because as the years have grown, the discussion around data quality has grown increasingly, and it's becoming more and more of an important topic. So I've been doing this for almost a decade now, so there isn't much that I haven't seen. But what I have a great ability to do is relate it to both the data and the corporate world. So I can talk on both sides and get everybody to understand in their own way the importance of these things, because I've seen it from both sides. So let's get started. Let's get into the meaty stuff. What is dirty data? So it's many different things to many different people, and it really depends on what area that you're working in. And so in the spend classification and kind of CRM database world, it can be things like misspelt words. So I classify a lot of travel data, and the number of times I've seen travel spelt incorrectly, or mileage. I've worked with parts where screws might be spelt incorrectly. And so you have hundreds, maybe thousands of rows, millions of rows of data, and you have the same item, but it's ever so slightly misspelt. So you don't always, when you aggregate it, you don't always see the true picture of what you have in that quantity. And it could be names as well. I mean, I've seen misspelt company names, personal names, and I'm sure you're probably watching this now nodding, going, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because I don't think I've met anyone that hasn't experienced that. Could be incorrect descriptions as well. So if you're working with an invoice description, somebody has bought something and put the wrong invoice description down. Or if you're in a CRM system, how many times have you seen that somebody's put the wrong notes in the wrong account because they've been in the wrong window when they've been doing it? So things like that happen. And things like missing codes, so product codes. If you're using product codes to order things for your business and you don't have them, it's really hard to manage your inventory, your forecasting, all that stuff. So, and you could have duplicates of those codes if some of the codes are missing. So it could be the same description, but one doesn't have a code. And then I'm sure you've seen this. This happens so often. It's data in the wrong columns. So this is particularly prevalent in personal data. So, you know, you've got first name, last name, email address, and then you've got maybe address 1, 2, 3, 4 and zip code. But actually what's happened is the whole address is in address 1 and nothing else. But then you go further down the data and it has been separated out. I've seen the zip code in the city column. I've seen the city column in the zip code. I've seen, I think in the US, you just have numbers for your zip code, so it's not too bad. But in the UK, we have postcodes, which are a couple of letters and then a number, a space, and then another couple of letters and numbers. Sometimes it doesn't have the space, so it causes all kinds of issues. Then we have no standard units of measure. So I've worked with lots of files where litres is spelt the US way, or the European way, or it's LTR, or it's LT, or it's an L. And when you have all those different units of measures, again, you can't manage and measure what you're using or what you're selling or anything like that. And it could be grams, it could be even like terms. So I was working on a project recently where we were talking about a supplier ID, I was talking about one type of supplier ID, the other person was talking about a different supplier ID. So when I provided the work that he had requested, it was the wrong thing because we weren't talking about the same ID. So it's really important to clarify that amongst your team, amongst your organisation, to make sure everyone's talking in the same language. And then you might have some currency issues. So, increasingly there's global data sets, and you might not realise that you have multiple currencies in one column. So you might have $5, $5, $5, and then $1,000, and it looks really out of place. And that's because it's a different currency and nobody's really flagged that up. So something to be aware of. And formatting too. So this is something that really drives me nuts in Excel. I can be doing the perfect formula, and it could be something like a VLOOKUP, and it just won't work. And all I have to do is change the format of the column and change it back, and it works. It's one of those mysteries of Excel. Or it could be your numbers are in the wrong format, something like that, or text, anything like that. That can cause lots of problems, especially if you're using multiple spreadsheets or multiple systems. When it picks it up, it doesn't read it properly. And of course, our good old friends, duplicates. So I don't think there's a database in the world or a data set in the world that hasn't seen some kind of duplicate or near duplicate. So that is my roundup of what I would consider to be dirty data. I'm sure there's plenty more, but I would say they're the top issues that you would find in data. And to give you some context and examples from the classification world, because I really love classifying data. I think data can tell you so many stories. So the first is this example here, which is LinkedIn. So most of us all met through LinkedIn. We all know what it is, what it does. But the description said restaurant. So this person classified it as a restaurant. So it shows that with data, context is really important. So that person hadn't thought, oh, wait, this is LinkedIn. They just looked at the description and classified it. But actually, the most likely and reasonable explanation for this would be that they have either recruited for a restaurant-related role, or they've advertised some kind of restaurant, or maybe it's some kind of training, but it's certainly not a restaurant. Then we have Thomson Reuters. Just again, they haven't looked at the description, but they have Googled it, and when they've Googled it, they've misread what the company does. So they're a publisher and events company. And then we've got thermal installations, which is something that probably happens quite a lot within data sets. The user has skimmed the data and misread the description. So actually these guys are thermal installations, not thermal insulation. So that was miscategorized. And then one of my favorites, joke technology. So when I was Googling this for a client, all I got up was joke shop, fancy dress, wigs, makeup. And I knew that couldn't be right because the client that I was classifying for was a charity. So I looked at where the company was from and Googled joke technology Germany. Eventually, I found out they were a manufacturing components and supply company. So it's always really important to understand context of who you're classifying for, what the data might be used for, or what the product might be used for, the service that they're buying. So I'm going to leave you with my favourite one, which really surprised me when I saw this in the data. So Tinder Corporation. So, you and I in the world have one idea of what Tinder is. But actually, there's a company in the UK called Tinder Corporation Limited who are an IT services company. So if someone had looked at that and not considered the context of the data, they would have just classified that as a dating app or advertising or something like that. But actually, by looking at the description, looking at the supplier, and also looking at the person that you're working for, who they were a charity again, they're not going to be using a dating app. So there's no way it could be that. So that's just a few kind of fun examples from the classification world. And it's really easy for me to pick out these really obvious mistakes and say, here you go. But actually, when you've got thousands of rows of data, it can be really hard to spot these things. And it doesn't have to be classification. It could be names, addresses, it could be product codes, it could be anything. It could be sales and marketing data, it could be inventory. And it's going to be really hard to spot those little inconsistencies in a massive data set. So how can we manage that and try to stop that before it happens? So when I'm classifying, I try to think of the following things. Look at the name and the description in context. Think about whether the company you're working for would actually use this product or service. I mean, it could be wildly wrong. And then values in classification are a great thing. And it could be the same in purchasing or inventory as well. So when I'm working with hotels, quite often you'll get values that are maybe, say, $20,000, $50,000. That's not going to be a hotel room. That's going to be a venue hire. So a little bit of knowledge and common sense helps guide you with the decision-making process. But if it's, say, anything under $5,000, it's probably going to be a hotel room or accommodation. And then, does the website, when you're Googling, match the description of the goods purchased? And if it doesn't, then that's probably not the company. So it's good to do the supplier name and what they sell in the search, just to make sure. And if you've got a country name as well, that's really helpful, because depending on which country you're Googling from, you're going to get your local results first. And check new companies, new data that you haven't seen before on Google. Don't just assume that the description is correct as well. As we saw in dirty data previously, there can be incorrect descriptions. So don't just take it at face value. Do a bit of due diligence and check it out. So it's not just things like classification, it's also supplier normalization. So this is a great example where I've been working on a global data set, and I know I've been guilty of this in the past before I actually learned and honed in on my skills. There's a company called Grainger, but actually there's two companies called Grainger. There's one in the UK and there's one in the US. The one in the UK is a house builder and landlord, and the one in the US is nuts, bolts, screws, MRO parts supplier. So it's really important to make sure that when you're normalizing, that you normalize it to the right company, because if this was all grouped together, then spend for the house builder could possibly end up being nuts, bolts and screws. And actually their spend value would be higher because it's housing. So you might think, oh, $50,000 on nuts, bolts and screws, whereas actually it's on rental or something like that. So it's really important to use as much information within the data as you can to guide you. So how can we manage that? Well, the first thing to keep in mind when you're normalizing is don't assume that you know what it is. And the best example I can give you there is the Tinder Corporation that we just used. Don't assume that that is what you think it is. It could be something completely different. And use the endings of the suffixes of company names to actually help guide you as to what country it might be based in. So Inc. is normally the US, Limited tends to be the UK, SPZOO I think is like Poland, SA, NVBV is all kind of European countries. So that can help guide you and help you check that the companies are, if they're the same or different. And just as I was saying, so where they're located really helps make you be able to check if it's right or not. So that's dirty data. That is what it can do, what it looks like. But what's the importance of actually having accurate data and data quality? Well, the first thing is it's going to save you lots of time fixing dirty data. And again, I'm sure there's quite a few of you watching who have spent days, if not weeks, if not months, trawling through spreadsheets and all sorts trying to fix mistakes that you've found. And it can be really costly to rectify. So not only time-wise, but you might have to get an external party in or hire some contractors. And, it's probably something that could have been prevented at the start. It also affects the decision-making process. So it's probably not something that we really think about a lot, but for the spend analytics part, if you think you're spending X amount with this supplier and Y amount with this supplier, and that's wrong, and you're making decisions based on that, then you could have some really serious consequences from that. But it's not just spend analytics. I mean, this affects sales, marketing, procurement, finance, production, forecasting. Imagine that sales and marketing have come up with a plan to run a big promotion on a product, and inventory and procurement don't know about it. So they don't know to plan for more product. They don't know to buy more raw materials in. It can really affect the whole across the organisation wide. It's not just your department or your team that this can affect. And let's face it, dirty data makes our lives more difficult, and who wants that? So what kind of consequences are going to happen from this? Well, as you can see, nothing good, that's for sure. So the first thing that I'm going to talk around is reporting and decision making. So cost savings. This is something I do a lot within my area, and when I classify data, suddenly companies have great visibility on how much they're spending with each supplier, because before they didn't even know that. So there's IBM, there's I.B.M, there's IBM Inc., there's IBM Limited. Suddenly that's all normalized to one entity, IBM, and suddenly that 20 million becomes 50 million because they were all over the place. Same with looking at how many suppliers do we have per category. So, oh my goodness, we've got 30 suppliers that we're buying office supplies from. We don't need that many office supplies. We could be negotiating better rates with people who we buy more from at a lower cost, and we only maybe need 2 or 3 suppliers, that's all. Things like databases, people's names and things like that. What if you're contacting the wrong people? You're wasting all that time and money on marketing campaigns that you're not even hitting the right people with. So it has wide and far-reaching effects. Back to the spend analytics side, you could be negotiating better rates with your suppliers or on a bigger scale because you actually know what's going on. You could be rationalizing those suppliers, or it could be products as well. You might realize that suddenly, okay, we are stocking 10 different types of screw, but actually we're only using maybe 5 of them. So let's have a look at how we can get rid of that inventory and have just these specific screws from these specific suppliers. And forecasting too. So if you're not putting the right information in, the right information isn't coming out, and then the decisions on things like planning, for example, are going to be could be hugely affected. And things like budgets, that is something that we are all conscious of in our organisations. How are we going to get more budget for our department next year? So you want to know exactly what you're using, what you are selling, what you are buying, so that you can go and argue your case to the business and show that you can be that's a benefit. And it's not just about talking about it. So when you are using charts to talk to the business, it tells a real picture. So the first picture I'm going to show you here is a list of unnormalized suppliers. Now you can probably see that there's a whole list there, but there's actually only a couple of unique suppliers. It's just that they've all got slightly different names. When I normalize those, there's actually only 4 suppliers, and that spend suddenly increases hugely with PwC, which to be fair, is in pretty much every data set I classify. They work with most organizations around the world. So that's a huge change in value from what you thought you were spending to what you're actually spending. And if you're a global business, why are you negotiating regional contracts? Let's negotiate a global contract and save some money. So it's really powerful to see the difference that can make. And one thing that I will show you as well is incorrectly classified data. So an example that is a real life example that I had was I had a data set with IBM, and some of it was classified as cleaning services. So that meant that every time they were refreshing, there was a little bit more cleaning services getting added to the spend category. So it might have started as $5,000 and then it became $10,000, and nobody had picked up on it. And when you are working with large organizations, they tend not to look at the smaller values. It tends to be the bigger ones that they are focusing on. So things like that can actually slip through the net. It's more, it's not unusual, let's put it that way. So in this example, you can see if you're looking on your charts and your analytics, you can actually see that you've got two level ones. One is facilities and one is IT. So if you were looking at that closely, you would know that IBM doesn't have any facility spend. So we would need to get rid of that because that is absolutely not correct. And then suddenly that graph and reporting changes. And that could change significantly how you make decisions on how you work with that business, how you plan, how you forecast, what kind of promotions you want to run, all those kinds of things. And it's not just charts and graphs and analytics that can affect it. It can also be things like technology implementation. So I'm sure that quite a few of you have experienced in businesses that you've worked in technology or software implementations that have gone horribly wrong. And that is always mainly because data cleaning and cleansing is always, pretty much always neglected. It's just not something that businesses tend to focus on at the start of a project. They're quite happy to invest hundreds of thousands or even millions of pounds on some shiny technology. But maybe the 50 to 100K that they need to maybe clean their data, they don't see the value in that. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to change is for organizations to view data cleansing as an investment, not a cost. Because what generally happens is the errors are only discovered post-implementation. And what that means is that you are already down a project with consultants, the software company, the team getting trained, and suddenly everything looks like it's not right and it's not working. And what does that mean? Well, that's going to mean things like your staff losing faith in the data or the systems. So they're going to become disengaged. Why should I use this? The old way was better. They're going to go back to spreadsheets and they're all going to be saved in various different places. You're going to have inconsistent data. They're going to claim it doesn't work. They won't trust the software or the system because it's wrong. And you're going to have a real problem on your hands trying to resolve that. It's going to cost a lot of time and money to fix. So at least double the cost of what it would probably have cost to fix at the very start of a project, and probably double the time too, because you're going to have to unpick everything that's been done while it's in a system, and it would have been so much easier to have fixed it at the very start. And even if you do fix that, well, are the staff going to trust that technology anymore? Are they going to want to use it, or are they going to just absolutely reject it now? And it could be that the project is abandoned, and I've heard of instances when that has happened, so it's not unusual. And another area that it's really prevalent and important is AI, machine learning and automation. So We have some amazing data scientists out there who are fantastic at what they do. They write amazing scripts and codes, but that data has to be cleansed and prepared beforehand because AI learns from training data sets. So if you have not cleaned and checked that data set or the multiple data sets that it's using to learn from, it's learning bad information. It might even confuse the AI. So the output you get just doesn't look right. And I know I've experienced this myself where the output has been horrifically wrong, but the data scientist has been adamant that the script and the code and the algorithm, it's all correct, and they've done everything properly. And that's true. And the main reason that it hasn't worked is because the data set that it's learned from is bad. So if we go back to that IBM example, if that was picked up as cleaning and was continually being refreshed over the course of a year, that number could significantly increase. And so the business might think, oh, we're spending this much on cleaning. But actually it's in IT. So that has an effect on how much you think you have, what you're using, the negotiations with the suppliers, all those different types of things. And even machine learning, it's instructive and it's based on coding and rules. But again, those codes and rules have to be built on raw data. So if that raw data is not right, they're going to pick up the wrong information. Those codes are going to be written, they're going to be wrong. And, how much of time wasted to fix all those codes when it wasn't necessary in the first place. So it's really what the old adage says. It's, rubbish in, rubbish out in the UK, garbage in, garbage out in the US. So you really do get out what you put in. So how can we ensure this data accuracy? Sounds like a bit of a challenge, doesn't it? And I'm sure that you're thinking it's pretty impossible. And I would never claim that maintaining or ensuring your data accuracy was 100% effective, but there are definitely ways that you can improve this. So the first thing to accept is that, there is no quick fix. There is no magic button or software that is going to fix this problem for you. When it comes to data cleansing, for the first time you do it, you need a human to do it. You need them to look at it and you need them to make sure that it's accurate. Has to be reviewed by a person. I cannot stress that enough times. There is, like I said, no magic quick fix or button. But also it's not just IT and it's not just the CDO and it's not just whoever Bob in the corner who looks after the spreadsheet. It's not just their responsibility. It's the whole organization's responsibility. So from the secretary or the receptionist up to the CEO, everybody needs to take responsibility for the data that they're working with. And a really great way to be able to do that is to show them the process of where their data ends up. So if you have someone that's entering numbers into a spreadsheet every week, and sometimes they think, oh, this doesn't look a bit right, but nobody's going to notice, I'll just leave it. They don't realise that when that goes up the organisation to, say, the next person in line, that they might be spending 2-3 hours every week trying to fix that problem that the data entry person has done. And then if that's not caught by that person, that then filters up into those charts that we saw earlier. And so then department heads, senior decision makers are looking at information that's not right. And they may or may not catch it at that point, depending on how familiar they are with the data. So as you can see, that little small mistake that you think nobody will notice can actually turn into a really big issue. It's really important to agree common terms, standards and processes within your organisation. So I gave you the example of the supplier ID. I mean, that really did, that was a waste of a couple of hours of my time. So I know what it's like. It's really frustrating when you have a situation like that. So it's always great to be really clear about, what is a customer? Because in different organizations, that's a different thing. What is a supplier? What is a product? Is it a person? Is it an item? Who knows? So get those processes and terms all agreed and defined. And again, if you get the organization involved and everybody's involved and has a say, then they're more likely to be engaged and work with it. And maintain your data. So this is something that I get a lot. I come in, I fix the data, make it all nice and clean and shiny, and then nothing happens. And in 6 months to a year, you're back in the same position that you were before because you haven't maintained it. It's like a lawn. It's like, cleaning your house. You have to do it regularly to keep on top of it. And one great way to help maintain is to spot check. And that helps you get to know your data. So the thing I always say is it's really easy to spot errors and mistakes if you're regularly looking at your data, because things will stand out straight away when they don't look quite right. So how can we make sure that we have data accuracy? Well, the first thing I always say is make sure your data has its quote on. So what that means is it should be consistent. So as we've talked about, it's all those standard terms, processes, procedures. Make sure everyone's doing everything the same way. Then it has to be organized. So what does that mean? Well, actually, data is quite like a closet. So you might have a really messy closet with all your clothes just thrown in there, and you know that your favorite top's in there, but you've got to rumble around to get to it. You're not quite sure, and it might be a bit creased. Actually, if you had organised your closet into, say, tops and trousers and skirts and dresses, and even by colour if you wanted, then you could literally just go into your closet, pick up what you wanted, and off you go. And data's exactly the same as that. So you can organise things by country, by department, by division, by process owner. There are a number of different ways that you can categorise your data to pull out what you need quite quickly. And of course, it has to be accurate. And accurate data is different things to different people, but ultimately it has to be correct. But I've also heard people say fit for purpose. So, it has to be whatever works for your organisation. And then once you have those three things, it can finally be trustworthy. And that means that you can make great business decisions, you can save money, you can even possibly save your business from having to make redundancies, or maybe you can grow your business because you know exactly what's going on in all aspects of the business. So we've talked about spot checking and maintenance. I would say that maintaining data really depends on the volume that you're dealing with. So first of all, I would say probably monthly or quarterly is the best time frame to check your data. Anything more than monthly and it becomes not a good use of time. Anything longer than quarterly and then your data starts to become aged and possibly incorrect and then quite timely to fix. So there's something that you could do before you maintain it, just weekly or monthly. You could just go in and spot check because things happen. People accidentally delete things, people cut and paste errors, people overwrite things, or people have their own opinion and they think, I don't think it should be that, I'm going to put it as this. So, but if it's got to be that way for a certain reason, then you want to make sure it's like that. And it's not always easy to kind of protect that data. So I'm going to show you a way to do that in Excel, which means anybody in the organisation can do this. It's not the responsibility of one person. It's a really easy thing to do and should be less intimidating for people who are maybe not used to working with data so much. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a data set and I'm going to create a pivot table. And, I'm not going to claim that this is the easiest option in the world, but it's accessible to everybody and it's a really great start. If you've got things like Tableau, Power BI, click all those kind of visualization tools. You can absolutely upgrade the way you do it to those tools. But this is a really great starting point. So in the case of supplier classification, I would have my normalized name and then the levels of the categorization. And what that means is that's going to aggregate the data down. But when the table first appears, it's not in a great format. So what I need to do is I need to change that to a tabular form so that I have my suppliers and then my categorizations along that way. And then, let me go back a minute. So I've highlighted just at the bottom there, there's a company called Brakes in the UK, and they're a food services company. And we've got some transportation classified there. So straight away, as someone who knows that data and knows that company, I can look at that and go, hang on a minute, that's not right. I need to change that. And it would be, again, if you were working with products or anything like that, then it would be the same thing. So next, we need to be able to work as efficiently as possible. So the first thing I would say is click on New Window and then select Arrange All. And what that's going to do is give you the options. Now, in this case, I would choose vertical, but depending on the type of data, sometimes horizontal works. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me my panes side by side so that on one I can have my pivot, and on the other, I can have my raw data. And, well, why is that useful? Well, what that means is I can scroll down everything, look and see where there is a supplier, or say it was a product code, and see if there's duplicates or multiple descriptions or something incorrect. I would then go into the raw data tab. I would fix it there. And then I would go to refresh all in the pivot tab again. And then that would remove any of the incorrect data that I've already fixed, which means you're not repeating yourself and going through the same things over and over and over again. So we all know that Excel can be really tricky to work with. It doesn't always like large volumes of data. So I wouldn't normally recommend this, but if you're working in Excel, then this is a way to get around large data sets. In this case, I separated out one supplier who had thousands of rows and went through it that way, and did the same with the pivot tables. But it could be that you want to split them out by country or division or business unit or something like that, or product group, and you could check it that way. But always separate it out, take it out of the file that you're in and copy it into a new sheet. And then again, you would go through the same process of having your tabular view, going down, having your two views vertically arranged, and then you can start to tweak the raw data and then refresh in your pivot table to have a look and make sure everything's looking all right. And change it. And then that is, just a really relatively easy and quick way. Once you've done it a couple of times, you become familiar with it. And again, it's about working with your data, looking at it, knowing it, and then things like this will jump out because you know when it looks right and when it looks wrong. So, in summary, we've gone through quite a bit there, so hopefully that's been of some use to you. I can't emphasize enough how important accurate data is. It is critical. It is not life or death decisions. Well, in some cases it could be actually, but in business terms, it could be growth or not growth. That is as serious as that. There are no shortcuts. You have to put in the hard elbow grease and find someone, if you can, that enjoys it, because believe it or not, there are people out there like me who actually enjoy doing this. So get them involved and know your data. So be familiar with it. Don't just look at it once a quarter, once every half a year, once a year for annual reviews or budgets. Get in there once a week, once a month, get familiar with it, and it will make your life so much easier. And then maintain it. So when you see things aren't right, keep going. Keep tweaking it as you see it. Don't just let it fester and grow into a huge problem. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And let's face it, who doesn't want that? But most importantly, please make sure your data has its coat on. So always think about it like that. So remember, it's consistent, it's organised, it's accurate, and it's trustworthy. And thank you for your time. I've got a couple of bits left to talk about. So first of all, these are all the places that you can get hold of me. So I tend to be on LinkedIn most, but you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. I've got my website, all those good things. And I just want to leave you with this little reminder of quote, because I think if you want to get everybody in your organisation involved and you want a really easy way to remember how to keep your data accurate, get that quote on. So let me just show you that now. Hopefully you will hear it okay.
You wouldn't go out into
sorry.
sub-zero temperatures without the correct protection. So why do so many companies forget to protect their data? Unprotected data can lead to bad business decisions that cost money and put jobs at risk. That's why your data needs its coat on. This means making sure your data is consistent, organized, accurate, and trustworthy. Consistent means using the same standards, terms, and classifications company-wide. Organized data makes it easier to find. Think of it like a messy closet. It can be difficult to find what you're after, even when you know it's in there. When organized correctly, it becomes easier to find what we want. Data should be accurate, which can mean different things to different people, but at its most basic level, accurate data is correct. And finally, data should be trustworthy. This is critical. If your team can't trust the data, they might not use it. And business decisions around jobs, staffing, and budgets are all based on data, so it's got to be right. Like any code, there are differences in the quality of data services out there. If you buy a cheap coat, it might not be waterproof or protect you enough, and it won't last more than one season. If you don't invest in good quality data services, you will end up paying twice as much, if not more in the long run, to fix the earlier mistakes. If you'd like to speak to an expert about data in your own business, visit theclassificationguru.com to find out more.
And that is the end of my presentation. I look forward to answering some questions that you may have.
Well, I have to say, Susan, that was an amazing presentation.
Oh, thank you.
You're getting a lot of praise from the chat. People really loved everything that you did.
Brilliant.
And yeah, they enjoyed it wholeheartedly. And
thank you.
Also, they have a lot of questions for you.
I love it.
I'd like to invite you now to your very own DSGO Live Q&A. The way it works is that attendees will send questions through the chat. I'll receive them and I'll forward them on to you. So, you ready?
I am ready.
Awesome. Let's get started. Here we have a first question coming in from Kevin. Kevin asks, from a data supply chain perspective, data quality can be affected at all levels.
Yeah.
Whether you are an analyst or an executive, you're a stakeholder. How do you bring all stakeholders to the table so that everyone is contributing to a common goal? So
I think it's what I was talking about getting the whole organization involved. So, and data can be siloed, but so can departments. So this department doesn't talk to this department, and they're all kind of like, this is my data, you can't see it. So if you kind of explain the process of where the data ends up when those people are working with it, or even get them to work, shadow them for a day so that they can see how their piece of work is processed, then that will help them be more engaged and feel possibly more responsible and more involved and want to make it better. So that would be my suggestion. I mean, you're not going to get that with it. There are people who just will not want to share. That is life. But if you can get the majority, then I think that you're onto a good thing.
Okay, awesome. We have another question coming in, this time from Manoj. The question starts by saying, great presentation. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
It was mentioned that a human check is needed for any data anomalies. But is that practical when we have a huge amount of data. What are your thoughts on data quality tools, which does some of the job for us?
So it's more about that first time you look at a data set, you need a human. And I will argue till the sun turns green that you need a person to check it first. So in my experience in the area that I work in, I have used automation tools, and what has happened is you spend so much time fixing the automation that's incorrect. It was actually quicker for me just to start from scratch and manually classify everything. So once you have that data right, absolutely automate it, make your life as easy as possible. But if you don't have that right data first, there's like I say, there is no magic button or software that's going to do that for you. Sorry.
All right. That's the harsh realities of life sometimes. We have another question coming in. This time the question is, my question is, when we have huge data sets with millions of data points, how do you approach correcting inconsistencies, especially on spelling mistakes in text features, incorrect values in the numerical features, etc.?
So take it in small chunks. So don't look at everything. Start with one area. So okay, it's names. Let's say it's names. So let's focus on fixing all the names first. Get those right, because that's probably the most important thing. Or what is the business looking at the most? So let's focus on those areas first. Don't look at it by row, but look at it by column and see what you can fix that way. And million data points, you can't do it all at once. So break it up into small manageable chunks. And again, maybe you need to split it by country, by business unit, something like that, just to help manage the challenge of working with large data.
Okay, solid advice. Now, another question coming in, this time from Monica. Monica asks, how important do you feel an enterprise-wide data governance group is to organizations? I feel that it would help in many ways, especially when implementing an enterprise-wide data dictionary, to help with your previous point that supplier ID meant different things to different people.
It's so important. But again, it's about engaging that department within the whole business. So I know of businesses who have that data governance department. Governance is such an intimidating word. So we have to make it more accessible to the people who are not into technology and data. They might just be salespeople, and they only just have to put some data into, once a week to record their sales or something like that. So it's about humanizing it, I guess, and networking within your own organization. Walk around the departments, introduce yourself, because a lot of the time there are governance departments, but most of the people that work in that organization don't even know about it. So yeah, go and network.
Okay, awesome, great. Another question coming in, this time from Ravid. Starts off by saying, great session, Susan. You're a rock star.
Hi, Ravi. It's my buddy.
Quick question, though. How long would it take for a mid-sized company to implement these amazing ideas like code and get rid of dirty data from the base?
So it really depends on the amount of data. And I normally work on one small part. So, for example, I've just classified 2.8 million rows of data in about 8-9 weeks. So that's one area of the business that we've transformed that relatively quickly. Now we're going to train the staff to classify accurately and have a process in place. But I mean, it really will depend on the size of the organization, the number of data, amount of data they've got. But you could do it within 6 to 12 months, which sounds like a long time, but actually it's quite short. And you want to make it a slow cultural change as well. You don't want to just enforce people to, you will do this. If you make it gradual and get people involved and take them on the journey, then it's going to be a lot easier.
Once again, solid advice. Now, another question coming in, this time from Bruno. The question is, how do you deal with data incompleteness?
So using pivots, I have software called Omniscope, which is data modeling and visualization tool. So I've developed my own methodology of finding those things. So normally I would say that you can find most of the incomplete data within your data set. That information is already there, it's just somewhere else. So a really easy example would be a missing product code. If you had that description and the exact same description was in the data somewhere else without a product code, if you had run a pivot table on the product description and then done the column as the product code, you would then see a product code in a blank, product code in a blank in the pivot table, and you'd be able to then go in and change those. Now, it's going to take forever in Excel, but I mean, it can be done.
All right. Again, small tips and tricks. The little baby steps can go a long way.
It is.
I think we have time for one more question. Gadia asks, it seems as though how to achieve data quality is missing in many educational programs curriculum. How can this be rectified?
Oh, what a great question. So I'm currently writing a book. So that will hopefully be published in the next year. But I get asked all the time to be referred to different resources, and there's not much out there. Like I say, it's a forgotten area, and I'm trying to shine light to it with my sparkly backgrounds and try and make people pay attention.
All right. Well, I think we can all agree that was a brilliant presentation and an even more wonderful Q&A. Thank you once again for joining us, Susan. It's been a pleasure hosting you.
Thank you very much.